In this video, I'll show you a step-by-step method for studying an orchestral score so that you actually get something out of it. Notice that I said a method, not the method, because I'm sure there are plenty of ways you can approach something like this. This video will give you at least one way. For the example, I'm going to use Shadow of the Dragon by McLean Deamer from the original soundtrack to Guild Wars 2 Living World Season 2. The full orchestral score was recently published by Materia Editions, who are kindly sponsoring this video. More about them later. Step 1. Choose something specific to study. Although it can be fun to let the music play and just read along with the score, I find that I don't really get a lot out of doing that. I'm too occupied listening and reading the music as it flies by that I don't really have time to absorb anything. So I recommend you choose one specific section to study. For example, just 8 bars, and focus on that section when studying. And I also recommend you choose one aspect to focus on. It could be the melodic writing, the harmony, whatever, but you'll get more out of a study session if you can find something specific to pay attention to. That way you can really get into the details and focus. For this video, I've chosen bars 35 to 42, which is an exciting build using a large group of the orchestra, and I'll be focusing on the orchestration. Step 2 is the easiest one. Listen. Listen to your chosen section a few times before going to the score, so you can really get a feel for everything that's happening. Let's take a listen to our excerpt from Shadow of the Dragon. This seems like a pretty obvious step, but I put it in to remind people to slow down and not just dive right into the score without really appreciating what they're listening to. Step 3, study each section of the orchestra separately. So that means you focus on the strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion, each one at a time. I'll start with the strings. We have a full 5-part string section, but notice that there's really only 3 things going on. In the violins 1 and 2, we have the melody. In the viola, we have an ostinato. And in the cellos and basses, we have the bass line. The melody climbs a G-sharp diminished 7th chord with a little neighbor figure before each leap up to the next chord tone. Violins 1 and 2 are in unison the whole time, with just one exception. At the very end, we have this rhythmic figure, and that's where they split into octaves. In the violas, we have the ostinato, or repeated musical figure, which is doing 2 things for us. The 16th notes are giving the music a lot of energy and excitement, and also telling us that the underlying pulse of the music is very rapid and agitated. But the violas are also doing a second job at the same time, which is harmonic support. We get the G sharp and B, the root and third of the chord. It's in this oscillating wave of chord tones and non-chord tones, or stability and instability. It's a lot like the suspension technique John Williams uses, which I made a video about. I'll put a link to that video either up here or at the end of this one. And finally, for the strings, we have the cellos and basses, which are working together and also doing double duty. The first is to hold down the solid G-sharp pedal, which grounds the harmony, gives us a feeling of tension as the bass stays put, but the melody and counter-melody rise. And also, like the violas, they give us a rhythmic element, which in this case is a constant driving pulse that's almost like a heartbeat. Next, let's look at the brass. Again, we have 5 sections within the section, but this time there are only 2 rolls. In the French horns and trumpets, we get a counter melody in octaves, which is like an echo or call and response to the main melody. And in the trombones, contrabass trombone, and tuba, we get the epic bwom, which gives the whole piece a feeling of power and dread. Next, let's take a look at the woodwinds. This time, there are 6 sections in the woodwinds, but again, the work is being split into only 2 rolls. The high winds, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, and a clarinet are playing the melody in unison. Same melody as the violins. The low winds, bass clarinet, two bassoons, and a contrabassoon are playing the bass line in octaves, same part as what we saw in the low strings. And finally, we'll take a look at percussion, which in this example happens to be incredibly simple. Just a cymbal swell at the final bar leading us into the next section. Step 4, study how the sections interact. Now that we really know the details of each section, we can better understand how they're working together. For example, it's pretty obvious that these low woodwinds are doubling the cellos and basses. But let's get a little more specific than that. Notice that we have 3 woodwinds against the 1 cello section, bass clarinet and 2 bassoons. So although it's going to be pretty subtle, that means it's likely the woodwind sound will ever so slightly cut through over the cellos. Honestly, I can't really hear it with everything else that's going on, but these are the kinds of details we can pay attention to when we focus on just one section of the music rather than the entire score all at once. Let's look at the melody, which is in high woodwinds and violins. Here we have 5 wind instruments against 2 violin sections, which according to Rimsky-Korsakov, at a mezzo forte dynamic is going to be a fairly balanced sound, with just the slightest of an edge to the woodwinds. However, when I listen to it, I mostly hear the violins. My guess is that it's in a fairly low register for the woodwinds, and so if you really needed those woodwinds to stick out, they'd probably cut through much more at an octave higher. However, in this section of the music, I don't think the composer really needed them to stick out, so where they are is fine. Also, it's interesting to note that the low bwom in the trombones and tuba are in the exact same register as the low winds and strings, but they're so powerful that we have no problem hearing them. In step 5, we're going to do a reduction. But before we get to that, let me tell you about this video's sponsor, Materia Editions. Materia Editions proudly presents the Guild Wars 2 Living World Season 2 scorebook, featuring the musical works of McLean Deemer, Lena Raine, and Stan Lepard, who are also known for composing music for games like Rock Band, Minecraft, Celeste, and Halo. The publication includes all 19 tracks from the original Guild Wars 2 Living World Season 2 soundtrack in full score. The music is crisp, clear, and well set, and the book even includes beautiful artwork from the game interspersed throughout. I actually wasn't familiar with this score before getting the book, but I really have enjoyed reading it while listening to the soundtrack. My personal favorite might be The World Summit. If you guys don't already know Materia Editions, they publish sheet music and scores exclusively from video game music. They have a great collection, including game soundtracks like Undertale and Celeste, so it's definitely worth checking them out if you're a game music fan. The score for Guild Wars 2 is available in book or digital download. Please get your copy today using the link down in the description. Now let's get back to the score study. Step 5 is to do a score reduction. The purpose of the reduction is to try to reduce the complexity of the full score down to its basic elements. That way, it's much easier to see the layers and understand how the different parts interact. I like to get the score down to as few lines as possible to really simplify the music. So I think for our example, we can easily get it down from 26 instruments to just 6 lines of music. I'll start with the melody, which was in unison on 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 1 clarinet, violin 1, and violin 2. All of that can be reduced down to just a single line. Next we have the bass line, which was in octaves on bass clarinet, 2 bassoons, contrabassoon, cellos, and basses. Again, we can bring all that down to just 1 line. In the middle, we have the viola ostinato, and that's active enough I think it deserves a line of its own. Next we have the counter melody, or counter line, on 4 French horns and 3 trumpets. We have the big bwom low octave from 2 trombones, contrabass trombone, and tuba. And finally we have that cymbal swell, which gets a line of its own. 26 instruments on 17 lines, down to just 6 lines. Doesn't the music seem way more approachable this way? Step 6 is the final stage, and possibly the most fun. What we're going to do now is take that orchestral reduction we just made, change it to a new musical idea, and then blow it back up to the full score. This way we can separate the orchestration and texture choices from the literal notes and see how the same techniques can be applied to different music. The idea here is not at all to create something original. I'm sure what we make is going to sound like a direct ripoff. The point is to go one step deeper into how the different parts are interacting with one another to make sure that we really understand what's going on. So in our example, we had a build on a G-sharp diminished chord. So how about we change that to a build on an A dominant 7th chord? And then to change it up just a little more, I'll change the meter from 4/4 to 12/8. It's still going to sound like a knockoff, but at least it's not a complete knockoff. But by going a step further than just reading and actually getting our hands dirty with the orchestration, we're going to get a much clearer understanding of how all the parts are working together. So here's what we end up with those changes. By reversing the score reduction and blowing the sketch back up into a full score, I feel confident that I understand how all the different layers are working together and what each instrument's role is in the final result. Thank you again to Materia Editions for sponsoring this video. I had a lot of fun making this one. Remember to use the link in the description to grab your copy of the Guild Wars 2 scorebook and let me know in the comments what you think of it. And as always, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.